The desert was quiet, too quiet for a world that used to pulse with industry and sound, and as the twin suns dipped below the fractured ridge of steel skeletons that once held solar towers, Kael Revenant walked alone, a shadow tangled in the fading light, his breathing muffled beneath a cracked respirator, his coat trailing dust like memory, the beacon in his wristband blinking red with every 10 steps, signaling he was far past the perimeter of what the sanctuary considered safe. But Kael never cared much for borders, not since the collapse of the Seventh Dome, not since Lyra vanished, and ahead of him, the wind whispered through the twisted metal, almost speaking, almost mocking, and then, there it was again, that faint pulse of blue light arcing in the distance, stuttering like a dying heartbeat, calling to him like it had for the past 6 nights, always the same hour, always the same rhythm, and he moved faster now, boots crunching across the sandlaced steel, past the grave of drones and shattered shells of forgotten androids, his fingers tightening around the grip of the rusted ion pistol at his side, though deep down he knew bullets wouldn't matter here, not where the light came from, not in the zone of echoes, where reality sometimes blinked and rewrote itself, and as he neared the epicenter, the signal grew louder, inside his head, not through the beacon, not through any frequency known to tech. He could feel it, humming beneath his skull, like someone else's. Thoughts shoved into his own, and then he saw her, or what looked like her, standing at the base of a broken calm tower half swallowed by the dunes, her silhouette shivering like a projection trying to stabilize, her voice layered in 3 tones overlapping. "Kael, why did you stop looking?" And he froze, mouth dry, unsure if it was real or the guilt finally turning into hallucination, but the way she looked at him, those green eyes exactly the shade they were when she left through Gate 3-2. Years ago, made the world around him feel too quiet again, too unreal, and then something behind her moved, a tall, stilted figure walking sideways through time like it wasn't bound to the same rules, and Kael instinctively raised his weapon though he knew it was useless, and the figure stopped, its face a smooth plate of glass that reflected stars that shouldn't exist, and Lyra's voice again, almost pleading this time. "You brought them here, Kael." You remembered too loudly. Kael didn't answer right away. His mind was grinding gears, trying to decide whether to run, fire, or speak, but his body stood still, frozen in the mix of shock and recognition, because something about the tall figure wasn't foreign. It moved like the archivists used to, from the earliest missions, the ones that never returned, the ones whose consciousness were rumored to be uploaded, stripped, and reborn as walking memories in failed containment shells. The figure tilted its head, observing Kael with interest rather than threat, and its chest plate flickered with glyphs that looked like corrupted versions of sanctuary language, half numbers, half prayer. "Lyra," he said, finally, quietly, like the name itself might crack the reality he was standing in. "You're not supposed to be here." "You didn't. I didn't die, Kael," she interrupted, her voice glitching like a corrupted file, and her eyes blinked out for a moment, just gone, then back, like nothing happened. "They didn't let me come back." The wind kicked up again, spinning grains of black ash and dust into spirals around his boots, and the figure behind her moved closer, a low vibration following each step like a cello string being plucked from another dimension. "He's listening," she whispered, stepping closer, her feet not quite touching the ground. "You shouldn't have remembered. That's how he found you. You dragged him here." Kael's beacon flared red so bright it whined, the proximity alarm screeching, and he slapped it into silence, his eyes locked on the archivist, if that's what it was, who had now raised one hand, and with a single swipe through the air, the entire horizon behind it folded in on itself like paper catching fire in reverse. "What is that?" Kael asked, barely a breath. "A witness," Lyra said. "He collects truth. And you're leaking it." Suddenly, Kael's ears filled with static and voices, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, whispering in all the dialects of Earth, Moon Core, and even the forgotten speak of the Jupiter colonies, like they were all talking at once through a narrow tunnel, all asking the same thing. "What did you see beyond the dome? What did you bring back?" His head throbbed. He fell to one knee, gripping his temple as if trying to squeeze the noise out, but it only got louder until, crack, the sound stopped, sharp and clean, and when he looked up again, the desert was gone. He was in a room, cold, sterile, humming. White walls that bled slowly into gray, with no seams, no corners, and Lyra stood before him, solid now, breathing alive. "You're in the interlayer," she said. "They built this between realities to trap people like us. People who remember things they were told to forget." She reached out and touched his face, her hand warm, and the moment she did, every memory he buried came back like floodwater, smashing into him. The unauthorized dive beyond the dome, the black monolith under the dunes, the sound it made, not a sound, a feeling, and the thing that crawled out of it wearing his father's voice, asking questions it shouldn't have known, and most of all, Lyra walking into it willingly, disappearing into the light and never screaming. "You bonded with it," he said, eyes wide, realization dawning like a slow apocalypse. "You merged." She nodded, solemn. "I had to. Otherwise, it would have come through angry. It needed an anchor. I made myself the door." "And now?" Kael asked. "Now." She turned toward the wall as it pulsed with growing light, shapes forming just beneath the surface like something was pressing from the other side. "The door is opening again. And it remembers you." Kael stumbled back as the wall began to ripple, not like a solid barrier, but like a membrane of water stretched too thin. The shapes behind it were pressing harder now, their outlines vague but wrong, bodies too tall, joints bending backward, heads that split and reformed as they turned. Lyra didn't flinch. "They're not coming to destroy," she said, as if reading the fear etched into every line of his face. "They're coming to extract. You brought a piece of it back with you, Kael. The monolith wasn't just a machine, it was a filter. And you were the one who leaked through." Kael tried to speak, but found his throat dry, like the air here was being replaced by something else. "Extract what?" He finally managed, breath catching. "What did I bring?" Lyra turned her head slowly toward him, the glow from the wall flickering across her skin like firelight, and said, "Memory. Emotion. Pattern. They've lost all of it. The beings behind the veil, they are ancient, yes, but not in the way we understand. They don't remember anymore, Kael. They rely on others to do it for them. That's why they built the zones. That's why the domes collapsed. They were watching how we handled grief, how we carried guilt." She stepped closer, voice lower. "And you carry so much." The wall gave a soft, wet pop as a slit opened in the center, vertical and oozing a dark mist that poured into the room like spilled ink. Kael stepped back again instinctively, gripping his weapon, not to fire, but as if it could ground him to something real. From the slit came a voice. But it didn't sound like speech. It sounded like his voice, echoing back his own memories, verbatim, words he had said to Lyra years ago, in the dark of the tunnel under Dome 7, when he first realized she was leaving. "If you cross that threshold, I won't come after you." The voice repeated it, again and again, tone warping with each repetition, twisting sorrow into sarcasm, affection into command, like it was testing how the words felt in different shapes. Kael's heart was hammering. Why is it doing that? Lyra didn't answer right away. Her eyes were locked on the slit, pupils dilated, jaw clenched. "Then, it's cataloging your breaking points. You still don't understand. You're not a visitor here. You're a case study." The mist coiled around their feet now, swirling symbols into the floor, glyphs Kael had only ever seen in the edge scrolls of forbidden maps, pre-collapse, pre-sanctuary, the kind whispered about in the void archives. Suddenly, the wall collapsed inward, folding like silk into nothing, revealing a space far beyond what should have been possible. There was no floor, no ceiling, just an endless vertical tunnel of light and shadow, filled with floating debris, shattered drones, data cores, bones, and in the center, hovering and pulsing like a suspended heart, was the monolith, smaller than he remembered, but somehow far more terrifying. It turned, or shifted, without moving, and Kael felt its gaze, though it had no eyes, settle on him. Lyra looked to him one last time before stepping toward it, slowly, as though pulled by gravity that didn't exist. "This is your chance," she said. "Go back. Forget again. Let them erase you like they erase the others." Or, she paused just before the edge, her silhouette framed in that impossible light. "Follow me and remember what they made us forget." Kael stared, trembling, and the monolith began to sing. The sound the monolith emitted wasn't music. It wasn't even sound, not in the usual sense. It was vibration folded into memory, notes made from emotions he hadn't felt in years, his mother's humming while welding scrap in their rooftop shelter, the way rain used to sound on the dome glass before the atmosphere thinned, the laugh Lyra gave once, just once, the night before her departure, when Kael told her his favorite constellation didn't exist, and he'd made it up just to impress her. All of it came back, not as memories, but experiences replayed inside his mind, like someone was sampling his soul. Kael clutched his head, knees wobbling under the weight of too much real, and the monolith pulsed harder, responding. Lyra hovered at the edge of the void, the light casting her like a living shadow, and she looked back, not with fear, but with urgency. "It's pulling your story forward, Kael," she said, her voice barely audible above the thrum of memory unraveling. "If you stay here too long, you'll forget who you are and become who it wants you to be." She extended her hand. "Decide now." Kael looked at her hand, then at the swirling tunnel of forgotten time, at the monolith that knew him, not because it had studied him, but because it had been inside him ever since that first breach. He wasn't just carrying a fragment, he was a carrier. A host. That's why the zone of echoes always responded to him. Why the machines never activated their defense systems. Why the perimeter alarms back at Sanctuary always flickered when he passed. He wasn't passing through a system. He was part of it. "I remember the breach," he said softly. "But there was something else. Something I never told anyone." His voice dropped to a whisper. "When I touched it the first time, it said my name." Lyra's expression shifted. Fear, recognition, awe. "Then it chose you," she said. "It wasn't an accident." "Kael, that means—" She didn't finish. A second rift opened behind them, ripping sideways across the white space like a gash in paper, and from it emerged three silhouettes, tall, cloaked, not human. Their forms flickered like projections glitching in different timelines, and they moved with intent, silent and swift. Each wore a mask shaped like a broken clock, hands frozen at different hours, and from the center of their chests, a thin beam of blue light connected them to the monolith. Kael's pulse raced. "What are they?" "Collectors," Lyra breathed. "They don't talk. They harvest. They're here for you, not just your memories. You've held the imprint too long. They consider that contamination now." Kael reached for his pistol again, but found it wasn't there anymore. Just gone. Erased. The collectors stepped forward, slow, synchronizing their movements like dancers in a ritual. Then, everything stopped. Frozen mid-motion, even Lyra mid-breath. Only Kael could move, his heartbeat the only sound now. The space flickered, turned black for a split second, like a blink, and when it returned, someone else was standing between him and the monolith. Not a collector. Not Lyra. A man. Wearing an old Earth pilot's jacket, scar over his left eye. Boots caked in Martian soil. Kael's breath caught. "Dad." The man didn't smile, just looked at him with the sadness of 1,000 lifetimes and said, "You brought it farther than I ever did, Kael. But now you have to choose what I couldn't. Let it end, or take it further than any of us ever dreamed." Kael stepped forward. The monolith pulsed again. The world shivered. Kael couldn't speak. The figure before him, the one wearing his father's jacket, with that familiar limping stance and oil-scuffed knuckles, felt too real to be projection, too imperfect to be one of the archivist phantoms. And yet, he remembered the transmission. The one that cut out mid-sentence 10 years ago. The one they said was interference. "Stay out of Zone 7. The signal isn't a call, it's a reflection." That voice had been his father's last. Until now. Kael took another step forward. Around them, the collectors remained frozen, caught in a reality that seemed to fracture every time he blinked. Lyra was locked mid-reach, her eyes flicked toward him but unblinking, waiting like a paused thought. "You're not him," Kael said quietly, pain laced into every word like barbed wire. "He's dead. I buried him." The man inclined his head, shadows peeling off his face like smoke. "You buried a version," he said. "But not all of me." The zone took more than body. It archived fragments, folded them into the monolith's memory lattice. It's how it learns. It's how it builds continuity. Kael narrowed his eyes. "Then why show me this now? Why wear his face?" The man's, its expression hardened. "Because this face still means something to you. And if we're going to breach the next layer, I need your mind aligned." Aligned with what? The air shimmered as the monolith pulsed again, once, like a heartbeat pressed through light. All around him, the walls that once felt clean and sterile were melting into something organic, something textured, veined like muscle, the color of storm clouds before collapse. He could feel Lyra beginning to move again, slowly, like time was restarting one limb at a time. "Aligned with what comes after remembering," the figure said, taking a slow step toward Kael. "You've retrieved the past. Now, it wants you to predict. Not just recall, construct. That's what it's feeding on now. Possibility. The shape of futures you haven't lived yet." Kael felt something shift inside his head, like a door creaking open. Flashes. A skyline that didn't exist yet, gleaming with floating roads and twin moons. A funeral held underwater, where no one could speak. A daughter's voice calling his name in a language he hadn't learned yet. It all streamed through him in flickers, too fast to fully grasp, but too vivid to dismiss. These weren't memories. These were prototypes. The figure extended a hand. "If you step forward, you enter phase 2. The interlayer will collapse. Lyra will follow. The collectors will awaken. And everything that comes next will not belong to time. It will belong to intention." Kael looked past him at the monolith, which now hung lower, spinning slowly, symbols changing on its surface, like a clock with an alien calendar. A name began to form. His name, but not Kael. A variation. K-A-3-L. Like it had already written him into its system. He turned to Lyra, who was finally fully moving again, eyes locking with his. "Don't trust it completely," she said. "Not even when it looks like people you love. Especially then." He looked down at the outstretched hand, then up again at the thing wearing his father's voice. Then slowly he reached forward and touched it. Reality convulsed. Everything inverted. Up was down. Light poured from beneath his feet, and Kael fell, or rose, through layers of memory shaped like architecture, corridors built from arguments, rooms wallpapered with childhood dreams, staircases that looped around regrets he never voiced. Through it all, the monolith chased him. Or maybe it led him. And when he finally landed, with a gasp and an impact that shook no ground, he was standing in the sanctuary command hub. But it was empty. Dead screens. Frozen time. Dust swirling under pale emergency lights. Only one thing moved. A child. No older than 7. Sitting in Kael's old recon chair. She looked up at him with his eyes. And softly asked, "Are you the one who left the door open?" Kael's mouth opened, but no words came. The child's voice still echoed, soft but cutting. "Are you the one who left the door open?" And something in her eyes unraveled him. Not just familiarity, but recognition. She wasn't a hallucination. She wasn't projection or test or trap. She was a result. He stepped closer. "Who are you?" he asked, voice low, as if afraid the question might erase her. She tilted her head. "I'm who you would have had. Before the breach. Before you let Lyra go alone." Her fingers danced across the dusty console. "I'm what the monolith wanted to see. The cost of forgetting." The room flickered. Her form shimmered, and Kael could see her alternate selves behind her, versions of her growing up in different timelines, all branching from the choices he didn't make. One raised in Dome 9. One scavenging wrecks with him near the salt seas. One who never existed. Lyra's voice broke into the silence, close now. She stepped into the hub through a breach that hadn't existed seconds ago, her eyes glistening with too much time. "She's a memory," she said. "But one you haven't lived yet. That's how the monolith works. It harvests possibility. Your grief was always the gateway." Kael turned slowly. "Then this isn't just about knowledge. It's about influence. It wants us to choose, not just witness." Lyra nodded. "Because choice creates. Remembering preserves the past. But choosing, that builds futures." Kael looked at the girl again. Her form was fading now, pieces of her turning to light and vapor, but she smiled. There was no malice in her, no judgment. Just peace. "If I walk away," he whispered, "do you disappear?" She shrugged, childlike and ancient all at once. "Maybe. Maybe you make me real somewhere else. Or maybe you make something better." She leaned forward. "But if you stay in the breach, you'll never stop spinning. You'll just keep remembering. And nothing will become." The monolith's pulse returned, a slow heartbeat. It was ready. Kael looked at Lyra, then at the girl. Then he reached toward the console and shut the system down. The breach collapsed inward, not violently, but like a candle blown out in the dark. The noise ceased. The monolith dimmed. The collectors dissolved like mist returning to sky. And Kael woke. He sat in the red dust outside the dome ruins, just before dawn. His wrist beacon blinked green, safe zone. Behind him, the remnants of the monolith had crumbled into crystal fragments, inert, quiet. Lyra sat beside him, breathing. No more echoes. Just silence. Just mourning. Kael stared at the horizon, the rising sun splitting the world into shadow and light, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel like either. He felt like both. And he smiled.